This is a vision I had February 16th and February 17th, 2021. The vision starts out in a place that I've seen before in a vision where the clouds are fully covering the sky, light gray, over the ocean. And then there's some land that it looks like it's near Whiskey Creek, but the land is raw land. There's nothing built on it or anything like that. And it's sort of a little bit, it's different on land. Just the ocean looks like where it's at there. And I can see this line of helicopters, and they're military helicopters, and they're coming sort of along the land, not in the air. I mean, not over the ocean, over the land. They were coming over across the land, and they kind of came out towards me, towards the edge, sort of like a cliff, and a bunch of military men sort of fell out of these helicopters, almost, I'm not quite sure what was going on, but they all kind of fell out. I didn't see where they landed or anything like that. They just dropped. And then one man came forward, and the position that I had was sort of like I was hovering out over the cliffs in the air, like over the water. And this general, he was a general, he came out and he faced the person, the point of view that I was seeing from. And he immediately came out and he wrapped my head, the person who I was seeing, their head, completely up in some sort of like bandage. And then they immediately unwrapped the head after that. And then after this, the general actually punched this person in the head. And they didn't budge. The person's head, they didn't budge in any way, shape, or form. They stood completely still without any impact or anything from the hit. And then after this, my perspective changed, and I was looking at the person, and I could see that they had something in their hand. They had lifted their hand up and held it out. And the general, he looked inside of the hand. And he began to pick things out of the hand. Everything was small and it fit in his hand, in the person's hand. And he found like, it might have been like some jewels or something. And he kind of picked it up and looked at it and then threw it down. And then he had like, there was like a little scroll there. He picked that up and threw it off. And then the man who, in his hand, he also had two small trumpets in his hand, and they weren't the shape of a long trumpet. They were a shape of a different kind of trumpet. I forget the name of it right now. But they ended up being the shape of his ear, like it could fit perfectly in his ear. And before he placed them in his ear, he took one in his left hand and one in his right hand, and the one in his right hand was full of sand, so he dumped it out. And the one in his right hand or left hand had sand in it as well, but not as much as the one in the right hand. And then after he dumped the sand out, he put these trumpets in his ear to where they fit perfectly, and then the part where the sound comes out was facing out. And after he did this, the last thing that was in his hand was a ring. And the ring came and it placed itself on the top of his head. It's almost like it grew and it came on the top of his head. And then the next thing that happened was I saw these swords, and they were very specific swords. They were like medieval swords. They're called something which I can't remember the name of it now, but if it's important, I can look it up. It starts with an R. It's a certain kind of sword of medieval time that has like a certain kind of handle. But anyway, the handle of these swords attached itself to the wrist of the whole arm of the man's right hand. And it was one after another, the swords attached, just like, almost like a handcuff itself, 7 of them attached to his arm. and then they sort of stood up on his arm as if they were facing out. And at this point, the man began to sort of walk across the sky over to the land. And as he walked, he grew in strength. He wasn't as strong when he was out in the sort of in the air, but as he walked, he became larger and larger, and you can tell that it was a growing in strength until he was walking on the land. So he approaches the land, and he can see sort of out in the middle of this area. It's almost like there's cliffs all around this area, and it's just this really green, beautiful land. And there's this throne sort of in the middle of it. And the throne has two forms. The first one was covered in what looked like, to be honest, it looked like blood. It was blood red, and underneath it were some objects that were bloody. I don't know what they were, though. Bones or something. I don't really know. And then the second throne is the same exact throne, but it just had two separate forms. And the second throne was some sort of like metal, silver, or some sort of metal throne. And at this point, a king was on this throne, but he was in spirit. And when he stood up, he changed to have the head of a goat. He had these long horns that almost looked like hair. And then he kind of came down and walked forward towards, it might have been towards the man. And as he's walking towards the man, you can see that the man still has those 7 swords standing up. And as he passes by the man's sword, the 7th sword closest to his elbow, it slices the head off of the king. And then I saw the body, it just looked like a goat. No king anymore, it was just a goat. And you could see that his head had been severed from his body, just a regular goat, and then it was in water. And then after this, the man, he humbled himself, and he got down on his knee. It looked like he was in prayer. And then while he was in this position, it looked like this army of men was coming in spirit, and they were coming like charging at, looked like toward him, but nothing came of it. There was no like attack. There was no war. Nothing ended up happening. I'm not even sure if something was supposed to, but you could see them like swords drawn coming toward him, and nothing came of it. And then that was the end of the vision.